Hello, everybody, and welcome to the March 1st, 2022 iteration of the Kubernetes SIG Windows community meeting. As always, these meetings are recorded and uploaded to YouTube, so be sure to adhere to the CNCF Code of Conduct. We can start off with some announcements. James, I believe this is your announcement, if you want to talk.
Yeah, a couple weeks ago, I did a demo for the Windows exporter, and the image, because of some CI issues, the image didn't get published properly, but the folks over there fixed that. And so now there's an image available, and it's just the latest, but you can test with it. And the next release of Windows exporter should have a versioned release of the image. So give it a try and let us know.
I'm happy to see it on the GitHub container registry too. So thanks for that. Yep. So yeah, folks, if you're new to using the GitHub container registry, we can navigate to the link and then just information about where to pull the image from if you want to use it in your deployments. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to announce here? You can just throw it out. If not, we can go into some of the agenda items.
We have one question regarding Windows 2022, the container image support. I don't know whether we can talk about it later.
Sure. Yeah. Do you want to? Do you think it's going to be a quick question or in depth?
Yeah, quick question. Mohammed, can you shoot the question? Mohammed's from our team. Mohammed, can you hear us?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm not sure, Mohammed. Basically, when we try to test Windows 2022 server, looks like Docker runtime by default. We used to have Docker runtime by default installed. Looks like we are not able to find that image in the Azure, but we are able to find that in AWS. So wondering, is intentional or is we are missing it out? That's a question. Mohammed, please add if you have any question.
I think so. I think I have enough context for that. That was intentional on Microsoft's edge. I think Brandon had a couple of blog posts that went out a while ago. We can, maybe somebody can find the link to them while we're continuing the meeting, and I can put them in the notes. But yes, Azure historically had released different VM images. Some were ending with -- with container images, and those came with usually Docker Enterprise Edition installed on the nodes. For some reasons that are highlighted in some of the blog posts, Microsoft has stopped doing that with Azure, and unfortunately there is no equivalent. And I guess I'm not aware of any changes with AWS or anything, but it seems like if those are still being offered, those are still being offered in AWS.
And
Okay.
we also have Azure images with container D instead of Docker as runtime?
We don't. I don't know, Muzz or Brendan, do you want to? I think that's covered in there.
Sorry, you're looking for the images with Docker pre-installed, like the VM host images?
Yeah, they're looking for the container
2022
images for Windows Server 2022 in Azure.
No, because the runtime is now owned by Mirantis, and that's part of the Mirantis container runtime, and it's licensed and installed by them. So that's why those images are being deprecated, because it's no longer under the jurisdiction of Microsoft. And it's now the licensing jurisdiction of Mirantis. So to install that runtime, you have to go through them. And I would expect AWS to follow suit with that soon as well. So that's kind of the situation. There's no plan at the moment to install or to provide a Windows container image containing container D pre-installed, because there's more than just container D needed usually, and our focus will be to provide an installation experience for container D that makes it easy to get it set up on Windows Server images. So
Question like if you are planning to bundle container D is also open source, right?
Mhm.
And so same way you can do a Docker C, right, instead of EE. I'm wondering what is the difference when you are planning to bundle container D, but why can't Docker CE?
Yeah,
Docker
I
EE,
mean,
and I understand it moved to Mirantis, but Docker C is still open source. It is kind of like container D, same open source, right?
yes, I mean, so that's, we've considered that as an option, and we're still looking into that and deciding whether or not there are asks from folks to do that, and it's good to know that you're asking these questions. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, we didn't see enough demand for Docker CE based images because since Kubernetes has moved to Containerd and Kubernetes is the popular, is the popular orchestrator that everybody's looking for, trying to use Windows containers. We know there's some demand for having Containerd similar images that we're looking into. Can I ask, like, what is it specifically you're looking for Docker CE to do, or like Docker based images?
No, basically it is kind of like we have been using 2019 with our test suite, even with our customer base. We are all moving to 2022. We are in the middle of container D validation, and I'm not sure. Like myself and James, we had a discussion. We are having some issue with the CNI. We are trying to address that. So container D is still not available for us. So the only option right now with the 2022, if you want to move away from 2019, like 2022 bundle, our CA everything files, because we expect via Docker runtime pre-install, which was the case in 2019. But now, until we move to Container D, we want to make sure we continue to support Docker, right? So that's when, like in 2022, it's not there. So that is why we are asking this question.
I see. So if
And
you
I
get
think
an
I
Go
am
ahead.
going to and cut this time box this. I'll let Muzz respond and then time box this to get so that we have a chance for the people who added to the agenda to
Yeah.
go, and then we can
Let's
continue
take this
on.
offline.
Yeah.
Do you want to just, I mean, I'm putting my email address and Brandon's email address. Do you want to just, email it to us, and then we can have this chat more offline, and whatever the results we'll share with the community. Does that work?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, that works. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. That was, I think, quick answer with a lot of follow-up.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, but right now those are not available in December 2022. Okay, thanks for asking that, though. We will try and help navigate all of that as best as we can. James, do you want to talk about the Windows 20 or the EDE tests with CAPC?
Sure, I'll try to keep this pretty quick. I'm going to share my screen.
Okay, let me stop sharing.
So one of the things we've been working on is, can everybody see the screen with the test grid dashboard? Is that the one that's being shared?
I can, but you might want to zoom in a little bit. It's
okay.
Kind of low DPI.
So one of the things we've been working on is SIG Windows has been using AKS engines, cluster bring up scripts to create clusters for all of the performance tests. And AKS engine, we've been investing more in cluster API for Azure to be a part of the Kubernetes SIGs. And so with 124, we've now cut over our release jobs that the SIG release team looks at to use cluster API for Azure. And so if you're not familiar with test grid, this is the URL up here. We have it broken down into a SIG Windows signal, which is the one that we monitor, and we have a triage meeting every Tuesday, actually right before this meeting. If you're interested in joining that, you can please, we put the meeting in Slack. We go through here and see if there's any flakes and try to track those down. And then we break it down per release that we have. So we have 120, 121, 123, and then release. And then there's a bunch of other related tests out there, and anybody can create tests out here. So the one that we switched over to is this CAPC containerd master job. And it's at this point is fairly stable. There are a couple flakes that we're looking through, but this is the one that will be reviewed by SIG release. What I want to do quickly is go through and just show you where the configs are and where the logs are, so that the community is aware of this. So all of the test configurations are in Kubernetes test infra, and we are under the config jobs Kubernetes SIG Windows, and there's a bunch of all our jobs are configured here. So underneath the master job here, and actually there's so much YAML that it's easier to look at it in the GitHub viewer here. So there's a bunch of pre-submits in here, and then there's a bunch of periodics. And so the job that we were just looking at is this one here. And it's configured to use Kubekin's image, and then it calls this script. And then there's some configuration. So this is just telling it to use the Kubernetes pre-built CI artifacts. It's telling it to use Windows and containerd and the size of the VMs underneath the hood. But you can find them all in here. They're all configured in here. This is another example of where we're using containerd on Windows Server 2022 and all the configuration that is required for that. This script, this CI conformance script, is documented over in Cluster API for Azure's documentation, the developer documentation. So there's a section called conformance testing, and there's a bunch of information on how to run this, how to set the different settings. I'm not going to go deep into this, but I just want to make it aware for people that are looking at debugging these things in any capacity. The Cluster API for Azure scripts, there's the CI conformance script here. It's basically just takes a bunch of those environment variables and makes sure that everything is all set up properly. And then it calls make test Windows upstream, and eventually drops us into this folder here, which is test EDE. And there's a Go Ginkgo suite that runs, and it does some more configuration and eventually creates the Cluster API for Azure cluster. Eventually, it configures all of the things that are required for running the tests, and then it runs kubetest. And so this is where all that's configured up. You can go and see that and run it yourself. In SIG Windows, we have a dashboard that we track all the flaky tests. So if you want to go debug one of these tests, you can find a test from this dashboard. We also review this every Thursday. There's a group of us that show up and go through all of the triage, all the issues. One of the triaging we do is the flaky test. You can also find that in Kubernetes by searching for label SIG Windows and kind flake. And then if you go to the dashboard and you're on the containerd capc jobs, you can click into one of these ones that's failing. You just click on it. It brings you in. There's kind of overwhelming here, but up in the top right, you can see the job history. You can see the actual prow YAML. This is very similar to what we were just looking at in the test infra job. So you can see that all those variables got passed through. And then you can, this is the link to bring it back to test grid. Here, we'll see that one of these tests failed. We get some information here. This isn't super helpful, but if you go into the standard out, there is a whole output of the test run, including it collects all the events for the failed test. So we can see that this happened to be the lifecycle hook failed for some reason. We can see what containers were running on the node and get some baseline information. If we go back up here, the other really useful thing here is this artifacts folder. This is a collection of all the logs that were run. So the entire build log is here. from the point where it's actually bringing up the cluster to running all the individual tests. In the artifacts folder, there is the main folder for Cluster API for Azure is this clusters folder. The Bootstrap folder is the Bootstrap cluster. If you're familiar with Cluster API for Azure, there's a bunch of information in here. We also collect all the CAPI controller manager logs. We collect what was actually deployed onto the cluster, and the cluster CNI select. But the interesting one is actually probably this capz conf. This is the workload cluster that was actually created that the tests are being run against. Here we collect the Azure activity logs. So anything that happened in Azure, like creating the VMs, creating the networks, all that stuff is all collected there. And then we collect the kube system things. The interesting things in here for Windows is there's a Calico Windows thing. And here we'll see the Calico logs. This is all the Calico logs that were collected for that for that thing, and then also kube proxy logs. So in here is the kube proxy Windows logs, and we'll see that we've got the entire kube proxy for the entire run. So you can, if something happened in kube proxy, you'll be able to look that up. And then if we go back over to machines, we'll see we have the control plane logs. There's things like the kubelet log for those, the cloud init log. And then for Windows, we've got a whole bunch of stuff. So we collect all the services, we collect the networking, we collect what interfaces were running, any containers that were running at the end of the job. So if some container got stuck, we collect the CNI. This is the actual CNI executable binary log. And you can see there's quite a bit of details in here. And the kubelet log is also here, which is probably where you'll be looking for most errors and flakes of that sort. So I know that was a really, really fast overview, but I wanted to get it, just share it and have it recorded so that we could point folks back at this. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and answer any questions and then hand it back to Mark.
Yeah, and I tried to capture some
question.
of those links in the notes. Oh, sorry, go ahead. I think somebody's asking a question.
Yeah, sorry. I didn't quite see the container D logs. It might have skipped for me in the screen at least, but it is collected.
It is. And underneath that kube system logs, there's a container D log system collector. So the way we collect those is via a host process container log that listens to the ETW events. And then it outputs that to standard out. And so we collect it all there. And then we can filter it and turn it on higher verbosity and things like that if we need to.
Mm-hmm. And in addition to that, I might be misremembering things, but wasn't there a discussion at one point to also collect logs from HCS shim as well? Because it might be useful for a more deep dive in some very cases that we've been seeing and couldn't really nail down without those logs, perhaps.
Yeah, you cut up a little bit, but I think you asked for the HCS shim logs. They're also in that container D logger. So it listens to the HCS shim ETW events as well. Mm-hmm. So we collect all of that within, and it's all interlaced so that you get the whole context of what's happening.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah, I think James did a demo a couple of meetings ago about that event flow log or container image that he built up. It lives in SIG Windows tools. It's under the host process folder. That instead of just collecting text logs for these, we're able to hook into wire up an ETW event listener and output those to the container images text and collect those. That's definitely worth checking out. And then, yeah, there are a lot of moving pieces involved in getting any of the tests, tests running in Prow. I think we've highlighted some of them here, but if anybody has any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us or in SIG testing. SIG testing, the SIG has done a couple of KubeCon talks about how all of this works. So that's also interesting. How Prow actually works. We just kind of touched the tip of the iceberg about how the configs in Prow are set up too. So there's a lot of moving pieces and a lot to learn here. But yeah, thank you, James, for the overview. Okay, I just wanted to give a quick update about the documentation updates that we had talked about previously. So a while ago, we talked about what we were doing to improve the Windows documentation on the Kubernetes.io website. We do have a meeting every other Thursday at 9:30 PST around this for folks who want to join. It should be on our same calendar, but I can give a quick overview of the status here. So there's one big issue that lives in the Kubernetes website repository that kind of highlights it's a lot of kind of just thoughts right now about all of the different things that we want to do to update the Windows documentation. The big ask from a lot of people, including the SIG Docs team, is to break up the big Intro to Windows Kubernetes page, which most people land on. It's been kind of, some content's been slowly getting removed, but there's a plan highlighted in that issue about how to break it up. So we've got like bullet items for the individual topics that we want to move out and where we want to move them, and pull requests open for a lot of them too. So, and another thing I'll highlight is that where possible, as we peel information off of that page, we are trying to put it next to the equivalent, next to like the discussion topics that are not focused on a specific operating system. Networking had a lot of examples of that, so I can just highlight that real quick. For example, when we talk about DNS resolution behaviors on Windows, we are just adding that to the DNS pod service page in the kind of in the already existing networking. Same with dual stack support, and this is fully supported by the SIG Docs and the enhancement team to do that. And we think it's really going to help make Windows look more like a peer or make Windows look more like a peer to Linux in the documentation, rather than having to caveat on a special page all the differences in Windows. Just have people say, I want to learn about DNS, and then say, like, see that information there. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done and pull requests that need to be opened for even moving, for both moving content and for just going and reviewing the pages that we do have. If anybody's interested, feel free to comment on the issue, open up a PR, and get involved with that too. So I will ask if there's any questions quickly, and then hand it over to the for the next demo. Oh, I will add too that we're targeting all of this work in the Dev 124 branch of the Kubernetes website. So we are hoping to have all of this done by the time 124 releases, and then that will just kind of be when all of those changes go live. Okay, Shinji, it looks like you wanted to present something, but you said 10 minutes. I think there's 4 or 5 minutes left. Do you want to present now or push it and go first next week? It's totally up to you.
I think I can do that now and make a quick demo to try to finish that in 5 to 10 minutes. Yeah.
Sure. I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay.
Can you share your screen, or do we need to?
Yeah, let me share my screen here. So is it large enough for everyone to see it clearly? Okay, so basically what I'm doing is that now we provide a way to run the Windows like test cases in the operational readiness folder. So we create a tool called operational readiness to run that. And basically what I'm doing here is that I add another like test case into like the GMSA full, and we call this function from the op readiness. And in order to do that, so here's my environment. I have my Active Directory server running here, and I have this node. It's a Windows worker node. and I add this to the domain of this AD server. So in this, so in the AD server here, we can see that I add, so this is the node that I mentioned previously, and this is the member of this service group, and this service group is linked with this GMSA account, so they are linked together. And then I create another folder here, and I let me delete this first. So this folder is shared with the group. So you can see that here. So this security group has the permission to read and write files into this folder. And I create a pod. The pod I created here is linked to this is joined to this. Let me find it here. So I have like this setup here. So after I create this pod, I should have the ability to read and write files into this into this folder. And so in order to run this test from the op readiness, we have some input like this. So now we have two tasks in the GMSA tests. One is called work end-to-end, which is same as here. So work end-to-end, and another one, which is I added, is called can read and write file into the remote folder. So we can run both of them here. And in order to trigger this test, we need some command like this. So the category is Active Directory, and both of these tasks have this is in this category, so they can run at the same. So both of them will run. So I click. And now this test is gonna run. So what it's gonna do is that when we create this pod, let me find this. So when we create this pod with GMSA, and if we're gonna test the storage, I write this content into this txt file. And then after the pod is created, I should be able to like cat this file and get the content. So this string should be inside the output. So that is my test, and we can see that it's finished. And there are two tasks running here. The first one is this task case to test the file, and we can see that so this is the contents, the contents of the file, and also it shows up here. So this is the file that I write into using the pod, and this is the other one that it works end to end. This is what we have in this gmsa.foo.go. So both of them can be triggered in the op readiness tool. So that is basically what I have here. Oh, it failed. Okay, create this account. Okay, this is something that I haven't seen before. Okay, so what I see here is that the read and write file passed, but the work end-to-end doesn't. So we can trigger it again to see if there's anything that, yeah, but this is basically what I have here.
This is pretty good. Thank you. I mean, we've been wanting to do this for a long time to test the GMSA upstream, how critical it is for Windows containers. One question, did you, so the domain controller is on the same machine?
The domain controller is on this VM, and this is where the pod and where the pod lives.
Okay, so
they're different VM.
Okay, so at the beginning, do you domain join the machine where the pod is running?
Yeah, the machine is added to this.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I think
this
the
is
way
the
the tests are set up, and because I saw that it was just the ED tests that were checked into the Kubernetes repository that were being edited, where there's some expectations around how the cluster is configured. And that includes that the machines that are running the pods that would try and join to it are already part of the domain before the tests run.
I
Yeah.
see.
Mhm.
Because Mark, I was more thinking about like being, remember how we used to do GMSA and then how, it has evolved kind of thing. So basically that expectation is however you do it, at the end of the day, as long as you have the credentials, this should be able to test, right? Okay.
Yeah, so basically you add the credential to the pod and you join the machine, you join the node to the AD server, and you share the folder with the service group. So everyone in the service group, in a security group can like read and write files to there.
Pretty cool.
That's
Thank
just been
you.
a long standing test that we've wanted to add. So thank you. And
Yeah,
it's
I was gonna
awesome to see
say
the
that
first
bug to add that functionality has been open for probably like 18 months. So
It actually, I've never see that bug before. It's like pretty interesting that I got this bug from the last run, but I triggered a new one and you can see that it passed. So yeah, the end-to-end passed, right? So I don't really have any idea why it doesn't work for the first time, but it works for the second time. So
no worries, but I'm sure we'll figure that out too.
yeah,
Thank you for demoing this.
no problem here.
So I think that's going to conclude today's community meeting. We'll see everybody in the future, hopefully next week. Thanks all.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
James, I think you need to stop the recording.
Gonna stop now.
Okay, I'm going to drop for